Saltun bonvenno al mia presento.
What gibberish is that, Amon?
That's not gibberish. That's hello. Welcome to our presentation in the universal language, Esperanto. So, real quick, can you explain what made up Esperanto?
Yeah, so basically, Esperanto is comprised of Polish, Italian, Russian, German, and English, basically creating a universal communication tool.
That's true. Now let's discuss what we're going to be discussing in this presentation.
So, a brief overview. We're going to be discussing Esperanto's history, connections, its affiliation with the United Nations, other languages, issues on success and translation, and lastly, the conclusion.
That's true. So basically this presentation is going to depict Esperanto in different multiple ways, which you're going to be going to see. Now let's move on.
So, Esperanto was an artificial language devised in around the 18th century. It's composed of four main things: prefixes, roots, suffixes, and word classes. And we see here in the example in English it says, I like to swim, and it translates in Esperanto to misatas negi. So basically, as you can see here, misatas negi is composed of Italian, French, and German. Basically a mixture of languages combining to form Esperanto.
That's true. And the whole idea behind Esperanto is to generate this fair communication tool, and we'll discuss that later on as well, but that's the whole idea you should carry in your head, is a language that unites all languages, if that kind of makes sense. Now let's discuss how words are put together. And this is a very simplex way, there's like multiples of this graph, but however, this is a very simplex way limited for this presentation. It's kind of similar to a certain subject at school, and that subject is
math. You basically plug in variables into an equation and you get an answer. Same as here in Esperanto, you plug in a prefix, suffix, root, whatever, you're going to get a word out, a simple word.
Now let's give them an example. Is that fair?
I think so.
Okay, now let's get the root san, which means health. However, when you add word classes to it, the word kind of changes, as in when you use the root san and you use the word class and you get the word san in Esperanto, in English it means
healthy.
Healthy. However, if you change the to the o, so you get san o, it means
goes back to again mean healthy.
Health.
I mean health.
Health, exactly. It goes back to mean health. However, when you add the prefix mal, kind of similar to or dependent opposite of in English, when you say mal san it means
you get illness or sickness.
Sickness. So it's kind of the opposite of health. So that's a simplex way on how words are put together in Esperanto.
So a little brief history on Esperanto. It was founded by Ludwig L. Zeppenhof. He was a Polish doctor who lived in a community where there was always disputes and a lot of differences and misunderstandings in language, basically. And what he wanted to do as a young age, he wanted to create a universal language that basically
could end these disputes.
Exactly.
And he was actually a Polish doctor, and he always grew up in a community with a bunch of different languages which raised disputes, as Brandon Campos was just discussing, and his ultimate goal was to stop these disputes. He said, when I grow up, I'll certainly destroy this evil. Was that similar to what you think he sounded like?
I think so.
Maybe. In Esperanto, it might have been different, but that's the English way. Anyways, let's move on. So now let's talk to the comparison to English. So the whole idea in Esperanto is different roots. And I'll kind of explain that. So like when you say maki in Esperanto, it's similar in the sense of it means?
In English, it means mock.
Mock. So you can see they're very similar, but however there's differences. Like when you say ride in Esperanto, it means laugh, which is getting it from a different language such as Spanish, Italian, French, and German. So Esperanto kind of gets all these root words from different languages and puts them together. And the whole idea of Esperanto is key is simplicity. And as you can see it, can you talk about the statistics that we have presented on the bottom right? Brian?
Yeah, so in English, basically, you have a bunch of words consisting of almost 1 million. And in Esperanto, it shortens that to about around 160,000
words.
Yes.
So as you can see, the whole idea behind Esperanto is to create this second language that's very universal where everyone can connect in a way. And we'll discuss why United Nations almost created this their universal language. We're actually on the United Nations side. Now let's talk about this. The United Nations granted Esperanto in their Montevideo resolution. However, United Nations granted the official support to Esperanto in their international auxiliary language, as that's what they created it. But then things started to change, and because they've seen the issue of the common language for all, and they've wanted to solve that dispute. However, when the United Nations adopted Esperanto as its working language, the French delegate stonewalled in favor of le français, which kind of opted away the United Nations of creating Esperanto the universal language. And this is due to politics. It wasn't Esperanto itself. It's more due to politics on why Esperanto did not go through as the universal language for the United Nations.
So, why didn't Esperanto not succeed? So there's a couple of reasons. Politics and connection with the Nazis. So basically, at the time that Lutenwig, he created Esperanto. He created to basically fix these communications that were happening during the war between Nazi Germany and basically the United Nations. So the Nazis basically, at the time, they were persecuting people who tried speaking Esperanto. And then another way why it did not succeed is because Hitler was targeting those people who did speak Esperanto and eliminated them, basically.
So what happened was Hitler regarded Esperanto as part of an international Jewish conspiracy. He always thought that Jews were using this universal language to get back at Hitler and the Nazis. And speakers faced, the reason it didn't succeed during the Nazi period is because speakers that spoke Esperanto faced persecution in regimes such as the Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union under Stalin. So in this time period during World War II, in the 1940s to 1950s and 1930s, if you were to speak Esperanto, you were basically killed or punished. And basically because Esperanto builds an international point of view as opposed to the overly nationalist and centralized policies of Nazis. So that's one reason why Esperanto did not succeed in the Nazi period. Now, let's talk about the Esperanto translation. And there's three ways how Esperanto has mix-ups in translation, how it brings people together in translations. It's culture, issues in the Esperanto translation, and an interconnection between all languages. So when it talks about culture, it brings everyone together through a simple language. It's what we discussed earlier. Like all these countries these languages such as English, Yiddish, French, German, Italian, Spanish, all these languages basically bring together in this one universal language and fair communication tool as Esperanto. And as you can see this photo on the right, it kind of has these simple words as pomo, roso, suno, arbo, birdo, libro. Basically, you can see that these words, Esperanto words, are very, very similar to words in other languages. And that's what the whole entire about Esperanto's translation is based on. It's not like this whole entire new language that everyone has to talk about. It's more of bringing languages together. Now let's talk about an issue in Esperanto's translation. An issue that happens is important words do not sound alike. An example is all the questions in Esperanto are actually two-syllable words, and they stress the syllable in the same way in every word. Examples are koi, kia, kiam, kyo. Those are like who, what, where, and why. Where in English, like in Esperanto, when you ask a question like what is this, the first response in Esperanto is who is that? And that doesn't really make sense in our English minds of English speakers here in the United States of America. But in Esperanto, that's how they speak. So a possible way it didn't succeed is because this issue in translation is what kind of put Esperanto behind other languages which are actually happening now. And an interconnection between all languages. This point's very interesting because in today's day, Esperanto is finding a new thing online. It's considered one of the biggest online languages in today's day. And that's when it's interconnecting because online with this huge base of connection between everyone, Esperanto's translation is able to be depicted online. Do you have anything to add there?
So you're saying kind of Esperanto didn't succeed because of the misconceptions that it was mainly intended to fix.
That could be true. I don't really think it's misconceptions. I think it's more of complexity, even though the ultimate goal was simplicity. Mm-hmm. So that's what was confusing. And it's confusing, as I say it, complexity, but the overall goal was simplicity. So that's the issues of Esperanto and the issues in translations of Esperanto and where the translations form from in Esperanto. Now, as a conclusion, before we sum everything up, I have a question. I want the audience, while you guys ask you this question, if you guys can think about it. After this presentation, do you guys still think Esperanto has the potential to unite all the people? What do you think?
I think it did, Ahmad. It was in the right direction. It just, at the time period, it wasn't the right time, I feel. But in today's world, I think it could have succeeded.
See, that's where I think we disagree. My personal opinion is I don't think Esperanto could be able to work as a universal language. I feel like it can work as like an online language, which is actually succeeding in right now. But for the United Nations, I don't think it will ever be the United Nations main language because you're not able to it's kind of confusing for a universal language and to input it for everybody to learn. So that's why I think it. Now let's start off with a brief conclusion of what we talked about. Did you even start off with that? Like, where did Esperanto originate from?
It originated from basically Nazi Germany.
Yeah, so Germany, right? So it basically came from these countries like Germany, Spain, Italy, and France, England, United States. All these languages formed Esperanto. And you could see that it kind of took a dip during the World War II and World War I era. However, and then we compared it to English and the translations within. That's basically how Esperanto is depicted in today's day, and it's actually very successful in online. Well, now is our time to go. I hope you guys learned about this presentation. My name is Alkhatib, and this is
Brandon Campos.
And
this is our presentation.
This is our presentation.